On Tuesday, December 12th, New York v. Jonathan Majors entered its 7th day of trial. On the morning of day 8, the prosecution rested first thing, so day 7 really was the last day of the prosecution's case in chief. At the end of this recap, we're going to touch on the state's burden here and some important questions that need to be answered, so be sure to stick around for the end. If you're not familiar with this case, prosecutors are alleging that the actor physically assaulted his then-girlfriend Grace Jabbari on the night of March 24th / morning of March 25th, 2023. And if you need to get caught up on what has happened so far, be sure to check out the link in the description below to a playlist of all the videos I've made on the subject so far. I know in previous recaps, I've talked a lot about the information that has been kind of hard to access for this particular trial. And I know there have been other people that have also talked about the same thing and probably actually much louder than I have. And so there also have been a number of journalists that have been, I guess, seemingly complaining about the people on social media commenting on this trial and complaining about the lack of information. And this kind of food fight seems like it's pretty typical of these kind of high-profile trials. But I will say, in researching this topic online, like a lot of topics, it is also interesting to see how things get reported. As an example, sometimes who is or isn't reporting on a particular story can be a whole story in and of itself. And that's why for researching this trial, particularly, it's been really helpful to use Ground News, who is the sponsor of this video. Ground News is an independent website and app that makes it easy to compare news sources, read between the lines of media bias, and break free from algorithms. Their website gathers news articles from all over the internet on any given topic and gives them a few different types of ratings. These include political bias and a factuality rating. Looking at the Jonathan Majors trial, it's pretty fascinating that reportedly almost no journalism outlets that lean politically right are reporting on closing arguments for the Jonathan Majors trial at all. Just about all of the outlets are either left-leaning or center. You can see this by looking up closing arguments on the Ground News website, as it lets you compare the headlines directly with easy recognition of these tags that show things like political leaning, ownership of the publication, and their factuality score. Take this article by The Hollywood Reporter, for example. It shows here that The Hollywood Reporter does lean left and that it has a high factuality score, meaning that it generally does use proper sourcing. Then there's this article from Spectrum News, which is considered politically center, and it also has a high factuality score. But another feature on Ground News' website that I love is called Blind Spot. This is where they feature stories that have little to no reporting by one side of the political spectrum. Half of them are intended for those on the left, and half of them are intended for those on the right. And the idea is that this conveniently gives you the ability to see all the stories being maybe promoted by one side and maybe hidden by the other. And in turn, this helps keep you from living in a political bubble by confronting some of the stories that might be getting hidden from you by the algorithm. It's great. I love it. And to go check it out, go to ground.news/Legalbytes. And viewers of this video can subscribe through the link in the description below for either $1 a month or get 40% off unlimited access to the Vantage subscription, which is what I have. So be sure to go there to subscribe, and thanks again to Ground News for sponsoring this video. Anyway, on to day 7. On this day, the jury heard from 4 witnesses. 2 of those were police officers. Then they heard from Jabbari's choreography talent manager and a DV expert. The first witness of the day was NYPD officer Erik Lucero. He was another officer who responded to Major's 911 call on the morning of March 25th. He testified that Jabbari looked confused and dazed, and she asked the police and first responders questions like, "How did I get here?" He also testified that when they tried to explain to her what was happening, she responded by referring to Majors, saying, "Is he here? Is he out there?" Officer Lucero also showed footage from his body camera. I'm not sure if this is the exact body cam footage that they introduced through Officer Lucero, but this is footage that was just released last week, so it can at least give a picture of something similar to what Officer Lucero showed to the jury. One of the things that he said was that he noticed Jabbari's right middle finger was very bruised. He also said that she was complaining about pain as well, and that she mentioned pain by her ear and the back of her head. Now, in cross-examination, it appeared that there were a number of things that he couldn't recall. For example, he couldn't recall what she was wearing or whether she was wearing anything below the waist. He also couldn't recall if she had indicated whether or not she had taken any sleeping pills. He also couldn't recall whether or not he had asked her how she had fallen. He did recall, however, that he had asked Jabbari what had happened to her finger, and he said that Jabbari asked him why her ear hurt. When asked, he also testified that he had seen Major's coat and noticed that it had a button missing. And he also testified that he did not see any blood or any vomit in the apartment. Okay, on to the next witness. This was Sergeant Bryan Hanson. He also responded to Major's 911 call, and they played the actual call during his testimony. He also said during his testimony that Majors had made the call out of concern that Jabbari had OD'd or tried to unalive herself. I do have a copy of the 911 call, and we're going to play the whole thing here without any editing, at least no editing on my part. I'm playing it exactly as I have found it in its complete form so that you can decide what you hear. Here it is.
Erik City 911, you need police, fire, medical.
Hey, how are you? Is it medical? Attempted suicide, I think.
What is the location?
252 7th Avenue.
All right, so that was 252 7th Avenue, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
What apartment?
Penthouse D.
Penthouse D?
Yes.
As in David, right?
Yes,
this is in Manhattan or in Brooklyn?
This is.
Hello, sir?
Yes, ma'am. This is in
You're
Manhattan.
losing service. I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, it's okay. It's in Manhattan.
All right. So this is Penthouse D. Just stay on the line, all right?
Okay, we'll do.
Penthouse D as in David. Don't worry about it. Speaking to me is not delaying anything. I just need some help, some information for the crew. They're already on the way, okay?
Okay.
Attempted suicide. Let me get them going. What happened exactly? Do you know?
No, I don't know. But she's unconscious. She's naked from the bottom down. She has a sweatshirt on. She's my ex-partner.
Right.
We broke up. I came back. She sent me text messages insinuating as much. I stayed in a hotel last night. I came home this morning. I banged on the door. I've been at the apartment for about 40 minutes now. I banged at the door. I couldn't get in. I finally went downstairs and asked the doorman to help us. And they let me in via the handyman.
All right.
Yeah. She's 30 years old. White, female.
All right. Does she suffer from anything prior to? Or no, she have a mental condition or history?
I would maybe say so. She has a history with...
What's her name?
Her name is Grace Caitlin Natasha Jabbari.
Grace. All right. Do you know what she did or what she took, or you don't know?
No, I don't know. I just know she's unconscious.
All right. No problem, sir.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get you over to the EMS. Do not hang up, all right? They're already en route, okay?
Okay.
All right. Stay on the line. Hold on. Arrow?
639.
639. I'm 2880 for the job number 1749.
Hello, caller.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, this is 252 7th Avenue in Manhattan.
Yes, sir. Right over the Whole Foods.
Okay. And the patient's breathing?
Oh, yes, sir. She is.
Okay. Is she awake?
No.
And phone number for you, 214-601-9547?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
This is Penthouse D as in David?
Yes, sir. Penthouse D as in David.
Okay. You're with her right now?
I've come downstairs to let the lobbymen know that you guys are on their way. So
they're going to be there as soon as possible.
Okay.
Obviously, if you could just
what should I do? What should I do?
If you could just make sure the door's open, and when you get upstairs, she didn't fall and hit her head, anything that you know of, right?
No, I think I saw a cut behind her ear.
Okay.
Yeah.
How old is she?
She's 30 years old.
Okay. So if you could just, when you get back upstairs, we just want you to keep an eye on her breathing. If she wakes up, we don't want to give her anything to eat or drink. Like I said, they're already responding.
I think they just walked in.
The ambulance crew?
Okay. I think this is the ambulance crew.
Is it the fire department?
I called them on with a good,
I think that's PD.
Yeah. That's the police, sir.
Hello, sir. That's the police?
I don't know what's going on. She's conscious, but she tried to. Yeah. So folks, will you just keep that confidential? Fella, this way.
So you're speaking to the cops?
Yeah, I'm assuming these are our guys. I mean.
Is it the police?
Girlfriend. I just came back home. Girlfriend.
Probably. Let me see if they have the location. Sorry.
Because I'm leaving. I just need you to phone me and say goodbye, Jonathan. There's no note. Just knowing what happened. With this place? Yeah. I finally got into the apartment. The apartment was open.
Yeah, they had low.
What?
The sergeant is at the location.
Okay, and just to confirm again, 252 7th Avenue, Penthouse D, between 124th and 125th in Manhattan?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, no problem.
Now, Sergeant Hanson did say that he did not see any evidence of an unaliving attempt. I'm not sure how many people responded to the 911 call before or after Sergeant Hanson, or how long others had been there before him if they arrived before he did. If he was one of the last to arrive, for example, things could have been moved around to aid Jabbari. Now, at the same time, I note that as a possibility, but I also want to note that from the information I could get, I don't know if anyone asked these officers if anything like that had happened, if anything possibly got moved around. Again, this is one of the frustrations of having to get secondhand information out of these trials rather than being able to watch it for ourselves. That said, one thing that he did say he noticed was that there was some blood on the bed. Specifically, he said, "When I turned to look at the nightstand, I noticed there was a small amount of blood on the comforter on the bed. It was on the top portion of the comforter closer to where someone's head or upper body would be." So that does sound consistent with her having some kind of a cut on the back of her right ear. The fact that there had been open bleeding could suggest that she got the cut right before putting her head on the pillow, which would be less likely that Majors had done that to her. Or it could be that this was just a wound that had been reopened. For example, she testified that she found like dried blood behind her ear, and so she kind of pulled her hair away. That could have reopened the wound. Now, later on cross-examination, he said that he did not observe blood anywhere else, nor did he see any vomit in the apartment at all. He also said that he did not take a photograph of the blood on the comforter, nor did he preserve the comforter in any way. And he testified that when he walked over to talk to Jabbari, she said she was struck in the head several times and that the defendant had grabbed her by the throat. Now, note that there were strangulation charges early on in this case, but those were dropped before trial began. I also saw some photos of Jabbari that were apparently taken that morning and which showed Jabbari with a bruised neck. But aside from this, there did not seem to be any evidence of a claimed strangulation. From Jabbari's testimony, as far as I could tell, she did not testify that Majors had strangled her at any point. And in fact, there were text messages between Jabbari and Majors that were leaked to the press months ago, where she told Majors that she stated clearly to authorities that no strangulation ever occurred. Now, I don't know if this text exchange was ever admitted into evidence during this trial, but if it were, it would create another potential inconsistency issue with Jabbari's narrative, whether that was what she said on the morning of March 25th, or what she said a couple days later, or what she said much later in court, maybe even depending on who she was talking to. Now, the next witness was Ben Totty. Mr. Totty was Grace Jabbari's choreography talent manager, and he testified that on the morning of March 25th, he received some phone calls from one of his other clients, Holly Blakey, who the jury heard from as a witness earlier in this trial. After one of these calls, he said that he went to Bellevue Hospital to see Jabbari in person. He testified that she was very emotional, she was upset, and she was devastated. He also testified that she showed him her bruised finger and the cut behind her ear. Then he testified that he went with her to wait to see a psychiatrist. While waiting, Mr. Totty said that Jabbari went from exhausted to concerned to frustrated. Speaking of the emotional impact of the alleged incident, he said that she was, quote, half the person I've seen before, unquote. Okay, so the final witness for the prosecution was Josie Torielli. Ms. Torielli is the witness that I mentioned in an earlier recap that the judge qualified as an expert witness for the purposes of testifying about DV matters. She apparently is a social worker who does consulting work for victims of DV and IPV. Now, because the judge had limited the scope of what she could testify to as an expert, she was really boxed in to only talking about generalities with DV victims and survivors. As an example, she said that DV physical violence isn't always about hitting someone. From what I read, though, she gave an example, but the only example she gave was choking someone. So the initial statement there before the example sounds like it could include, for example, physical intimidation by throwing things. Like, there was an example of Majors, I guess, throwing a candle at a wall, and there was a candle and some glass that had shattered with it. However, the expert didn't testify that that would be included with physical violence. So it seems like they wanted to go that far, but maybe couldn't. And that could be a limitation altercation that is noted by the jury. And it also seems to suggest that following Sergeant Hanson's testimony about Jabbari saying that Majors had strangled her at some point the night before, the prosecution may be trying to suggest that Majors may have done this and try to get a conviction in this way. But again, like I said earlier, there doesn't seem to be any testimony coming from Jabbari herself about Majors strangling her at any point. And on cross-examination, Ms. Torielli testified that she has never worked with anyone traumatized by false allegations, nor has she worked with anyone who has faked trauma. She agreed with the defense attorney that there is no way to look at someone and tell if they've experienced trauma. She also agreed with the defense attorney when she said that not every disagreement or argument is IPV. And honestly, that's a pretty reasonable statement. However, there was a question about her potential bias on cross-examination. And this is a pretty routine question for basically any expert witness, because the reality is that it's really not the hardest thing to be able to find someone to look at this universe of facts and come to an expert opinion that benefits your side. How well that opinion holds up when tested is, of course, another matter. But generally speaking, the jury is going to be a bit skeptical of really any expert witness unless they're able to answer a very particular question that the juries would have no way of answering on their own. An example of this was in the Gwyneth Paltrow ski crash trial, where Paltrow had a biomechanical engineering expert who testified that the plaintiff's claim that Paltrow hit the plaintiff was literally impossible according to the rules of physics. And he showed this by laying out the math for the jury very clearly on a whiteboard, all the while explaining why the other physics expert's math was wrong. But where the expert opinions are a little bit softer around the edges, jurors are much more likely to discard it. And that's particularly true if the jurors can sniff out bias, not just from a financial perspective, but also from a foundational professional perspective. And here, the response by Ms. Torielli to the question of whether or not she's biased was not necessarily what you want to hear as an objective third party looking to maybe lean on her opinion. Particularly, she said that she's not biased, but that she has a different worldview about DV due to her profession. In my opinion, different worldview is a poor choice of words. Even though it comes from her professional experience and her education, different worldview, it suggests that she might have a particular lens through which she sees relationship issues. And so that foundation might impact the resulting conclusions that she makes about them. Thinking about it another way, what if the jury doesn't share the same worldview as her? What if the jury senses that the foundation upon which she has reached her conclusion is not the way that the jurors see the world? Then they're totally going to disregard her opinion. If I were an attorney putting this expert up to testify on matters like this, I would rather she use language like, I have unique insight into matters like this due to the fact that I work with these kinds of matters all the time. It would be implying that she's giving insight into something that most people don't know about or most people don't think about just because of the fact that they're just not around it. But she's able to sort of pull back the curtain so that they can see what's behind it and then understand what she's talking about. It's different than saying that she has an entirely different worldview, because it implies something that is not going to change, and someone else might have a different worldview that is also unlikely to change. Now, of course, once again, this was just a snippet of her testimony, and I could not see it for myself to determine if maybe this was just a very small moment that is relatively insignificant in comparison to the rest of her testimony. And maybe the jury was in fact locked in with her. I don't know. But in my opinion, it is better for an expert not to come in saying that their conclusion is based on coming at it from a different worldview than other people, because it makes it easier to disregard her opinion. Anyway, that's it for the prosecution's case in chief. And here I want to remind you of the big questions in this case. Remember that because the burden of proof is on the state in this case, it's the state that has to prove beyond reasonable doubt that Majors assaulted Jabbari here. Usually by the end of the prosecution's case in chief, before the defense has put on their witnesses, it should feel like it's basically a secured conviction. It should really feel like the defendant is totally screwed. And that's because the state has put on all of its evidence. They have laid everything out from their perspective, and the defendant has yet to put on his own evidence. Then as the defense gets into their case in chief, the pendulum might swing a little bit in favor of the defense, depending on what evidence comes out, of course. So at this stage in the game, before the defense puts on their case in chief, I'll pose this question to you. Do you think that the state has proved their case? Do you think that the state has proved beyond reasonable doubt that Majors assaulted Grace Jabbari on the night of March 24th / morning of March 25th, 2023? Or do you think that there still are questions that never got answers? If you think at this point that it looks muddy middle goes to the defendant. In other words, if the jury is not certain that Majors assaulted Jabbari at this point, he probably should be acquitted. In my personal opinion, there is too much reasonable doubt in this case to secure any conviction. The state's best proof that Majors was the cause of Jabbari's injuries is Grace Jabbari herself. But there are too many inconsistencies and too many questions about her perception on that night and her memory beginning the next morning. There also are too many questions about her ability to use her right hand in a bunch of different ways after the alleged incident with Majors, which never really got cleared up. Now, I know there have been plenty of people that have been commenting on these recaps talking about their different experiences with fractures, and it can totally vary both in terms of pain and in terms of ability to use the body part with that fractured bone. The thing is, though, I haven't seen any testimony from any medical personnel or any medical expert testifying on these varying experiences. And I really think that this leaves open a hole for reasonable doubt to walk through. But those are my thoughts. What do you think? Agree or disagree? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this or at least found it interesting or informative. And if you did, I would love it if you could hit the like button. It does help us with the YouTube algorithm gods. And if you're new here and you want to see more trial recaps like this, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can find out when the next video is uploaded. See you in the next one. Hi, puppers. Hi. What are you doing?